Who first shared their stories in caves? Connected art, nature, and science led us toward new horizons. Who thought to capture motion? Spark an engine to life. Turn television into a playground. Every day, you create the playful, the functional, and the unexpected. You break down walls and take us to astonishing places. Tell stories, leap borders, and create beauty for tomorrow. Because at Unity, we believe the world is a better place with more creators in it, where everyone has a chance to shape the world.
Good afternoon and welcome to our 2021 South APAC webinar series. And Sarah will just pop up my slides for me in just a moment. We'll get started. Hope everyone's doing well today and staying safe. So the South APAC region, just to remind everybody, we have a very diverse group of people coming all the way from India, covering surrounding countries, Greater India, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific. And each week this year, we've been bringing you live content since April. This is our second last week of content for the year. Next week will be our wrap for 2021. Just some reminders for interaction in today's webinar. Please do not use the chat for questions. All questions should be placed in the Q&A box. We will either answer those via text during the webinar, or we'll leave them to the very end for the main Q&A session. And we also do not use the raise hand function in this webinar, so please refrain from doing so. Just a reminder, complete the survey form at the end of this webinar. This is valid for folks who have joined us on Zoom and who have become a registered attendee. If you are joining us from one of the other streaming platforms, please refer to our social media links and register for the webinar, either for today's or in future, if you'd like to be a part of this lucky draw. And where are we at in the schedule for the month? This is our second last one, as I had mentioned. Today we have the beginner's guide to in-app monetization. We have a team all from Singapore office today. Hey Marcus, how you doing? Marcus is our main presenter today, doing this.
Hi Andy.
Hey.
Thanks, doing good. Hope you're well too.
Yep, awesome. So today's session was pre-recorded last night. As you know, some of you have joined us throughout the year. The whole world doing Zoom meetings and webinars. We've had some challenges with graphic quality, so we found this the best solution to deliver good AV quality to you. Hence, Marcus will be with us to answer Q&A. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over. Jenny, if you can start off with Marcus's presentation for today. Hope you all enjoy.
Thanks Andy, thanks Jenny. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on Beginner's Guide to In-App Monetization. Thank you for taking time to join us today. My name is Marcus and I'm a client partner at Unity Technologies, focusing on in-app monetization. In today's webinar, we will have about an hour or so together. So I'll be touching on 3 different topics. The first topic would be what is monetization, how we at Unity Technologies think about monetization and how we define monetization. Next, we'll then be talking about why monetization matters, because if it doesn't matter to you, then you probably would not be interested in learning more about monetization, and also would not be interested to learn about how you yourself can get started with monetization. So that brings us to our final topic, which is how you yourself can get started with in-app monetization. So by the end of the webinar, I hope that you'll be interested to find out more about monetization, as well as eager to start on your own journey on monetizing your app. So what is monetization? At Unity Technologies, we believe that monetization is about driving revenue, but at the same time, continue to deliver great user experience. And this makes sense because that is what keeps your user within your game. And if you were to forsake a good user experience in chasing revenue, then what you'll find is that over time, more and more users will leave your app, and that leaves you with less and less users to monetize on. So it is important to keep in mind that these two things go hand in hand, and you should not forsake one for the other. So in-app monetization typically happens in two ways. The first way is to show some form of advertising or advertisements to your users, and this is what we call IAA. And it typically happens through advertising formats, which we will touch on later on during the webinar. The second way is to create an opportunity where you allow users to exchange real-world currency for some form of in-game currency that allows them to either progress further in the game, enhance their experience, or progress faster even. So in an ideal scenario where you have smart implementation of advertising and in-app purchases, and at the same time taking into account player experience, continue to maintain that great player experience for them, it will occur something like this, where players will be so happy with their player experience that they'll be asking you, hey, how can I watch more ads? Why are you not letting me see more ads? Can I make more purchases in your store? So it kind of creates a win-win situation for both parties. For your players, they are happy with the player experience, they are feeling more engaged, more excited about the further developments of your game. And for you, you're happy because you're making more money and you have a successful monetization strategy. So here we have the monetization spectrum. On one end, you have IAA, and on the other end, you have IAP. So IAA, if we recall, is in-app advertising, and IAP is in-app purchase. So you might be wondering, okay, I am a game developer developing hyper-casual games, or I am a game developer developing hardcore games. And so where do I see on the spectrum? Are they mutually exclusive? Can I have a blend of advertising and in-app purchase? So this is what we generally see on the spectrum. On the end of advertising, we see a lot of hyper-casual games, games such as Pac-Man. And as we progress further up, for example, we see casual games such as Angry Birds, mid-core games such as Brawl Stars, and then hardcore games such as Genshin Impact. We see more and more addition or skew towards IAP. And something you might note is that for hardcore games, it requires or players expect an immersive environment or an immersive gameplay. So you can imagine when adding some form of advertising, it breaks or dilutes the immersive experience, which is very important to gamers. That is why for mid-core, hardcore games, we see more skew towards IAP. And another thing that you might pick out from here is that if you notice, for hyper-casual games, in this example, Pac-Man, Angry Birds, they are single-player games. And for mid-core and hardcore games such as Genshin Impact and Brawl Stars, they are multiplayer games and involve some form of PvP aspect to it. So you can imagine that for single-player games, it's easier to have a blend between IAP and IAA because it's easier to keep that fairness in balance because it's just a single-player game. Whereas for multiplayer games, it's a bit more difficult and complex to add in some form of advertising, especially if you are going to reward users for watching an ad. So that is what we see on the monetization spectrum. So now for some common monetization metrics, which you might have come across as you are researching on monetization in learning more about them. Let us go through some of them today. For starters, impression would be each time an ad is shown to your user. And for estimated cost per mile, ECPM, or estimated cost per 1,000 impression, this is the value that advertisers typically pay to you to show an impression to your user. And then if you want to calculate how much value you are getting by showing ads to your users, this is how you do it. You can use this formula, ECPM multiplied by number of impressions divided by 1,000 to get that value that you are generating through showing ads to your users. Next, we have fill rate. Fill rate would be the ratio between the number of bid responses that you receive from advertisers against the ad request that you send out to advertisers. And then average revenue per daily active users, or UpDAU in short. This is a high-level overview metric, revenue metric that shows you the overall health of your game in terms of generating revenue. And how you can calculate this is by taking your total revenue divided by the total number of daily active users that you have. So this gives you an overview of how much revenue you are generating per user. And last but not least, we have lifetime value, which is the revenue that a user generates for you after you subtract away the cost that you took to acquire that user during the entire lifespan in your game. So taking the revenue that you generate from that user, so it can be both from in-app advertising as well as in-app purchases revenue as a whole, subtracting away the cost that you took to acquire that particular user or cohort. So that will give you that user or cohort's lifetime value. So why monetization matters? Why does it matter to us apart from, having a lot of money, making a lot of money and doing things like this out of enjoyment? There are other things that bring benefits to your game as well that you could consider. So first up, we have user acquisition. After acquiring users and you want to monetize on these users, so in monetizing on these users, you would be able to generate an additional source of revenue, which you can then use to acquire more users and keep the cycle going. So with more users coming into your game, you can then allow for more impressions to be monetized. So this is one reason. The next reason would be sustainability. So there are other channels of generating revenue. For example, you can look for investment, you can look for sponsorship, but these are all external sources of revenue that you might want to reduce your reliance on. And one way you can do so is by monetizing on your users that you work so hard to acquire. So in monetizing your users, again, you generate an additional source of revenue, which you could reinvest either into your game by developing more features to keep users engaged in your game, or by even creating new games for new users or existing users. Last but not least, we have engagement and retention. So these are metrics that have been said to be affected if you affected negatively if you were to introduce some form of in-app purchase or advertising into your game. But we have done research that showing ads actually, and with smart implementation of ads and showing them to users, you'll be able to bring about positive impact to at least retention and other metrics that you might want to test against. So by improving retention, it is beneficial for you because then you'll be able to keep users longer in your game and monetize them longer, which brings scale to your revenue. So this was the study that I was referring to. And this study was taken in 2020, conducted then for our 2021 Unity Gaming report. So in this study, we tested the metric of retention across several time frames from day 1 all the way to day 30. And what we did was to show two different cohorts. One cohort of users, we do not show them any ads, and the other cohort, we showed them ads. And what we found is that except for game categories such as arcade, casino, role-playing, and simulation, for other categories, we see an improvement in their retention metric across the different days. So this shows that with smart implementation of monetization techniques, you'll be able to bring about additional benefits to your game. So in essence, monetization is important because it's one of the key factors in keeping your game going, to sustaining your game in its life cycle. And also importantly to note that monetization, again, should be considered in relation to your gameplay, and it should be a complement to your gameplay. So the game's life cycle goes as you acquire users, you want to retain them, and we have seen that monetization help in some way to retain users. And after retaining users, you'll be able to monetize them as they stay in your game. And with monetization, you'll be able to generate a sustainable source of additional income, reducing your risk by in terms of reliance of external source of revenue generating channels. And with this additional source of revenue, you'll be able to reinvest into your game either by acquiring valuable users to your game in terms of high lifetime value, or you can also develop new features or new games. So I hope you understand why monetization is important, and that triggers your interest in learning how you can get started in your own journey. So that's what we'll be finding out in the next part of the webinar. So in doing so, learning how you can get started with monetization, first is also important to understand your players, what type of players exist in your game, and maybe what type of players you might want to attract to your game. So coming out with different player personas, these are not exhaustive, but it gives a good picture in general what kind of players exist out there and how you can use these player personas, their likes, take note of them, and how you can align it to your monetization strategy and make improvements to your gameplays so that you can monetize on these users. while at the same time keeping a good user experience. So if we take a look at the collectors, as the name suggests, they are people who or players who like to collect things, for example, avatars, items, and even characters. So tying it back to monetization, you can create characters, new characters in your game updates. You can add avatars to different characters. You can even have items to different characters. So this is how you can tie in monetization to different player personas. So even with advertising, you can reward users for watching some form of ads and give them in-game currency where they can accumulate over time in exchange for maybe some form of characters or avatars. So these are some ideas that you can think of and brainstorm around player personas. Next, we have IAP. So taking a look at the different categories of IAP, we have 4 that we'll be touching on today. Firstly, consumables would be one-time purchases or one-time use. For example, if they were to purchase your basic currency in your game, which is maybe gems in the case of Brawl Stars, and in exchange for some loot boxes which they can open. And upon spending that gems, they would have to then repurchase gems. So that is why we call them consumables. Secondly, we have non-consumables, and they typically exist in either skins or characters where they would last a lifetime once the user purchased them. And next, for number 3 and number 4, we have subscription-based, and they can be auto-renewing or non-auto-renewing. So the difference between them is that users would have to opt in to refresh their subscription once it comes to an end. And these subscriptions typically exist in the form of some form of premium pass, where upon purchasing them, users will get access to additional characters, additional tiers in your games, and more features that typical non-paying users will not get. So some good practices for IAP. Firstly, keep your storefront clean so that users are able to navigate and not get frustrated and be able to see what you're trying to offer to them in terms of deals and in-app purchases. And then use clear labels to identify or mark the things that you're pushing towards your users. So it draws their attention and it serves as a notification, something new is being released in the store. And also communicate value clearly to your users so they know exactly what they are going to get when they make a purchase. And also think about having fixed timing in refreshing your deals and offers within the store. Because there can be a situation where users go into your store and they find that, hey, today there's nothing of interest to me. And I want to come back only when there's something of interest to me. So in having a fixed timing where you refresh your deals, they know that, hey, okay, I can come back tomorrow at maybe 1 p.m. and there will be new deals which might be of interest to me. So you create a better user experience for them. And last but not least, remember to always ensure that the things that you're offering in your store adds to your gameplay, either by engaging them further, for example, matching it to their player personas, or helping them to go further in the game or faster in the game. Next, moving on to advertising formats, which we will be using to show ads to users. So first, we have rewarded format, rewarded video, or rewarded playable. So this format exists as a full screen format where it is very immersive to the user, and users have to opt in to undergo some form of task. So in this case, it would be watching a video, and upon completion of the video, they would be able to get a reward which relates to your in-game currency. So this is a very popular format because it gives the user a benefit, and they are not watching an ad and not getting anything in return. In fact, they are getting a valuable in-game currency for you in exchange for their time. So the next format would be interstitial. Like the rewarded video, it's a full screen format, but the difference is that for interstitial, users do not opt into it. Interstitial would occur at certain points where you designate. So it's very important to select good points, good triggering points where it will be shown to the user. So one example would be, for example, a level completion. That would be a natural occurring break in your app or application. And this is a good place where you can show users an interstitial ad to minimize the disruption to their gameplay. We have banners next, and banners would be maybe familiar to most of you. they exist either at the top or at the bottom of the screen. And this is best practice so that you will not be able to, or you will not disrupt their gameplay, minimizing the disruption to their gameplay. And they typically exist either in text format or static images. Moving on, we have native ads. Native ads outside of gaming would be quite familiar to most of you tuning in. You will see them in several apps, for example, Instagram, Facebook, where as you're scrolling, you'll find that some ads are very natively implemented and blends into the native environment of the app. And for gaming, we are seeing an increasingly popular implementation of them, where in this example for Brawl Stars, they have a game mode for soccer. And so what they did was to implement a native ad as the background within the game mode. So again, it is very non-intrusive and it does not disrupt the user's experience. So typically it exists more from a branding point of view. And last but not least, we have offer wall. So offer wall, like the rewarded video, is an opt-in ad format where users would enter the page and look through your offer wall, the different tasks that they can undertake in exchange for a reward. So in doing your due diligence in researching how you can get started, it's also important to do your research on popular games that have already found success in terms of gaining a lot of users or having a lot of users playing them and monetizing on them. And this is something that is very smart to do because they have already gone before you to do the necessary research. They have implemented things that have brought success. So what you can do is to simply download their apps, have a play around the apps in your same category and see what are the successful things or what are the good things that they are doing. So in doing so, you might want to ask yourself some questions centered around who, what, when, where, and how. And this is how you can do so. So who do you want to show ads to? What kind of user segment? And an important way you can do so is to segment your users into different categories. So one example would be to segregate them according to payers and non-payers. So payers would be players who maybe made a purchase in your store, and non-payers would be players who are playing your game for free. So maybe you can consider showing different kind of ads to different segments. So what kind of ads do you want to show? Do you want to show rewarded videos, or do you want to show just interstitial, or maybe you want to show a combination? And in relation to your segments, maybe you would want to not show any ads to players who are already paying by buying some form of in-game currency in your app, and only showing ads to non-payers who are playing your game for free. And also ad frequency. How often and when do you want to show users? Would you show users your ads? So for example, do you want to show more ads to your non-payers since they are not providing any revenue by buying in-app purchase items? Or do you want to show ads to both segments? So frequency is something important to consider as well. How often do you want to show ads to your users? Next, trigger points. Where would you want to make your ads appear? So for example, if a user has completed a level in your game, that would be a good point to show an interstitial ad. And also important to personalize it. For example, if you were to show rewarded ads, a trigger point would be, for example, if they have finished a level and they have very little life left to continue playing your game, you might want to show them a rewarded video then, because it makes sense for them in terms of the rewards that you are offering your user. And then how does all this tie into your gameplay? Ensure that all this that you are implementing relates to your gameplay and is an improvement to your gameplay, helps your users to be more engaged in playing your game. So these are some questions that you might consider while you are playing or doing your research in successful games. So we have also done up a study as part of our gaming report in terms of the kind of consideration developers are thinking of in setting ad frequency. So you can see some of it would be, for example, if they are showing ads too frequently, they are worried that players might churn. So these are the different considerations you can take and metrics that you might want to come up or design an experiment and allow data to inform your decisions in implementing certain monetization mechanism. So looking next at IAP and ads and how you can balance the both of them, it is really genre dependent. And again, as part of our Unity gaming report, we have done up a study and we see that different genre have different reliance on either ad revenue or in-app purchase. So for example, taking a look at word category games, they have the highest reliance on in-app advertising at 80%. And on the flip side, for adventure category, you see that that category has the least reliance at only 19%. So you can see that different categories have a different reliance, and you can use this as a benchmark for the category of games that you are developing, and then come up with some experiment to adjust the split accordingly. So now that you have learned why monetization is important, what monetization is, and how you can get started, the next step would be who can you work with to ensure that you have a good monetization strategy, and what are the partners that are out there. So ad networks are basically partners that will be supplying demand to you. So you can call them ad sources, where they will be supplying advertisers to you in bidding on your impressions to help you to monetize on them. So then the next question would be, is one ad network enough, or should you be working with multiple ad networks, and what are the pros and cons associated to each of the choice that you would make? So in working with one ad network, the benefit is that there's only one SDK to implement. So that means that there's less monitoring, less updates to be aware of. So overall, easier to manage. For multiple ad networks, the benefit is that you have more demand for them, but then the cons is that you would have more SDKs to work with. That brings about increased complexity, maintaining of bugs and crashes, more contact points to work with. So you might need a bigger team if you want to work with multiple networks. And in comparison, for a single network, you can just have a small team. So maybe start off with a small network, just one network, and then work your way up, scaling up to multiple networks. So other things to consider, as mentioned, would be the demand, the size of the demand that you require. So for example, if you work with one ad network, there may be a time where the ad network has a seasonality attached to it, and they will not be able to fill all of your impression, leaving some revenue on the table that you will not be able to monetize. In comparison, if you work with multiple ad networks, even if one ad network has a downturn in demand, you would be able to rely on other partner networks to fill the impressions that you want to monetize on. So these are some things that you can consider in deciding whether you want to monetize with one ad network or multiple ad networks. So if you're thinking to yourself that, okay, I might want to just monetize with one ad network, but I want as much assurance as possible that I can monetize on most, or if not all, of my impression. Something that you can consider would be to work with a partner like Unity, where we serve over 25 billion impressions per month. And by integrating with our SDK, you will immediately get access to the other programmatic partners that we are working with. And that is a huge base of more than 60 other networks. And it includes players such as AdMob, Snap, Bungle, as well as others. So this is something that you can consider. Other networks that you might want to consider and are popular among developers are as such as part of our gaming report. You can see the rankings on the table on the left, on the right. And some consideration that you want to take into account would also be the type of demand. For example, if you're a game developer, you might want to work with an ad network that has more specialty in gaming audience. And then maybe also look at the size of demand, how much impressions can they fill for you, what kind of eCPM they can provide to you, as well as whether they support the ad formats that you're thinking of implementing into your game. So other things to consider would be also reporting features, does it fit with your workflow? For example, what kind of data do you need? What kind of ad controls and ad filters do you need? So if you're looking for other form of sources in terms of recommending ad networks that you can work with, one good source and third-party source that you can look at would be AppsFlyer. So AppsFlyer would release this annual report where they rank ad networks in terms of different factors, considering things like fraud, ad revenue, as well as number of ads running with each network. And for Unity, we are very proud to share with you that this year for AppsFlyer's in-app advertising report, we have been ranked #1. So if you do not want to go with working with just a single ad network and you want to work with multiple ad networks, something that you would want to consider would be having a mediation provider. So a mediation provider is basically a monetization tool that helps you to maximize fill rate, your eCPM, as well as to allow you to have an efficient management of the multiple ad networks that you would need to work with in one place. So if you look at the illustration, if you are working with and without a mediation, you can see that without a mediation, you would have to work with all the different ad network partners individually, and you probably would need to code it, which is a tedious and tiresome process. But with mediation, you can manage them in one place through a UI, through a user interface, and manage the different partner networks through your mediation SDK. So if you're wondering if Unity has an mediation for you, I'm glad to share that yes, we do, and it's now in open beta, which you can consider as well. So in using a mediation, there are several methods which you can use to monetize and work with your ad sources or ad partners. So let's talk about the one that has been around the longest, which is traditional waterfall. And as the name suggests, it flows from the top all the way to the bottom. So in a traditional waterfall, what you would do is typically rank your partner networks in terms of either eCPM that you manually input or historical eCPM. So you will see that here, network A historically has the highest eCPM at $4, and network B has the lowest historical eCPM at $1. So what will happen is that network A will get the priority to win the impression. Only if network A doesn't have any advertisers who are willing to bid for the impression, will network B get the opportunity to bid for the impression. So it goes from A, B, C, and then D. So in this scenario, network C only got the opportunity to bid and win the impression because network A and network B either did not want to bid for it or did not have any advertisers to bid for it. So in this scenario, maybe you can already point out that there could be some revenue opportunity loss because in a case where network C has an advertiser who is willing to pay above its historical price, it might not get the opportunity to serve or win the impression because it is ranked below network A and network B. And this happens because this ranking system takes into account historical data and it's not real time. So in order to solve this issue, there's something called bidding, which allows the bidding process to take place in real time. And the ad call would be served out simultaneously to all the networks that you're working with. And each network does not need to wait for the network rank above them because they're all being called simultaneously. So in this scenario, you can see that network C with the highest bid would actually get the opportunity to win the impression. So all of them have the same opportunity, but because network C has the highest bid, it wins the impression. So if you are thinking, okay, does all network support bidding? The answer is no, not all networks support bidding. And that is why there is this hybrid model where it's a combination of the traditional waterfall as well as the bidding model. So what happens in a hybrid model is that the ad call would be sent out to both your bidding partners highlighted in blue as well as your waterfall partners. So what happens is that we will get the winner of the bidding partners, in this case network C at $7, and insert the network C's bid into your waterfall setup. And as you can see in your waterfall setup, the winner would be network A, assuming that network A has advertisers who are willing to bid for the impression. So network A would win the impression at $8 ECPM. So hopefully this gives you a good understanding or a good foundation in understanding how mediation works. So next up, you also need to understand the structure of a mediation group. And a mediation group is defined as a group with same combination of settings that work together to optimize revenue being generated by an ad unit. And you can understand ad unit as an ad trigger point, whereby it's a location or a place in your app where you would allow an advertisement to be shown to your users. So it starts off with the application that you want to monetize, and then you will select the ad unit within the application. For example, extra life rewarded video for your Android platform, and then attaching different settings to it. For example, for this mediation group, will it apply to a certain geo or many geos, and what audience segment would apply to? And then following that, you will be also thinking about how many partners you want to involve for bidding, as well as how many waterfall partners you want to be in this group, or would it be a combination of both bidding partners as well as waterfall partners? Last but not least, I would like to introduce to you Unity's gaming services, which is an end-to-end platform that is designed not only to help you build your game, but also to manage and grow your game. And as you can see, we have a suite of services all the way from multiplayer, backend, analytics, player engagement, as well as monetization, which we have touched on today. So if there's any services that you are interested in, please feel free to reach out and we will direct you to the right Unity representative to help you along the way. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned a bit about monetization and that sparked your interest in finding out more about monetization. If you have more questions, you can feel free to drop an email at tomarcus.tan@unity3d.com, and as well as looking at different resources that we have shared here on this slide. So for example, if you want to get started with Unity ads to monetize with us, you can go to this link. And if you would like to learn more about growing your mobile game, there's also a resource for you, as well as case studies on how Unity ads have helped many different games, either by generating more revenue or by improving certain metrics. You can check out this resource as well. So thank you again for joining in, and let's move on to Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
I have one question for you, Marcus. That big wave that's behind you, how dunked did you get after that hit you?
Oh no, it's actually a visual effect. So maybe I should conduct a webinar about photography as well.
I don't think there's any other Q&A there. Sarah, can you just pop up the slide, please? And we'll wait for maybe 30 seconds to see if any of our audience have Q&A. And just a reminder that the survey link is in the chat window below. You can click on there for your chance to win a Unity swag pack. We sent out a bunch this week in the last couple of weeks. So please fill in the survey, opt in if you would like to be included in this. No more Q&A? Nope. Okay. Well, if there's any other questions, you can always feel free to message the email in the chat window. We've got Marcus's email, but there's also events_sapac@unity3d.com. And in the meantime, please stay safe and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you very much for joining us today.